Some articles we've acquired from the parents, grandparents, siblings, wives, and lovers of everyone here. Namely, their eyes. Cooperate.
I've made videos about making villains evil or evolve and unpredictable, but I think one of the strongest tools you have for a villain is its presence. We've all experienced it whether we realized it or not. There's just certain antagonists that when they walk into a room, everything goes quiet and all eyes are on them. I've been running games for a long time now, and I did think at one point that aura was something you either had as a GM or you didn't. Some kind of natural performance gift. But I don't think like that anymore. I think it's actually a skill, and it's built out of specific repeatable choices, and today we're going to be taking that apart piece by piece so you can build it at your own tables without stealing your player's agency to do it. So let's get started. Aura is not something that happens when the villain appears. I think it's something that's harvested when they appear, you know, because you spent 3 sessions quietly planting it. Johann Liebert from Monster is a great example. For huge stretches of that story, he's barely on screen, but you feel him everywhere. In the orphanage that quietly got destroyed from the inside, in the criminals who won't say his name above a whisper, or the trail of death that nobody can connect until it's too late. By the time he actually steps a foot out of the rain and looks at the camera, the audience is already holding their breath, and that's something that he earned off screen. Or take Shrike from Hyperion. Before it ever physically shows up, it's built entirely out of pilgrim accounts and one absolutely horrifying image. A tree made of thorns, each one holding a body frozen in time, screaming forever. When the Shrike finally steps into the present, nobody needs an exposition dump. The dread's already been building up in the background. This isn't some sort of storytelling trick, it's actually got roots in how horror scenario design has worked for decades. There's a principle I've seen, it's called the rule of 3 warnings, where before you throw an existential threat at your players, you seed 3 different kinds of clues, each one escalating. A rumor, something distorted, second-hand or half-believed. Then physical collateral, smashed steel, an unnatural patch of frost, a signature left at a crime scene. And then a direct sensory brush, the smell of ozone, footsteps outside that don't match anything in the area, gone before anyone can react. And honestly, this really tracks with how our brains actually work. There's real research on threat perception showing that people preload a fear response just from hearing about a dominant dangerous figure's impact, long before they'll ever meet that figure directly. Your amygdala doesn't wait for the monster, it reacts to the story of the monster, if you get me. So here's how I'd actually run this at my table. Call it the Steel Crypt. Over 3 sessions, your party's investigating missing merchant caravans. We're not going to throw them into a fight, we're going to give them the aftermath. Every guard killed with one perfect puncture wound straight through the throat. No wasted movement, there's no messy struggle. Swords still sheathed, no gold's been taken. Just pages torn out of spellbooks every time like clockwork. By session 4, when they finally walk into a courtyard and find a lone knight standing there quietly holding a bloodied needled rapier, your table is already scared. You haven't rolled initiative yet, you haven't said a single intimidating line. You just let them do the math themselves. A word of caution though, don't turn that pre-build into an unskippable monologue where some NPC sits your players down and explains the villain's whole deal. The players need to find the clues and connect all the dots themselves, and that's why the dread works, because they've built it, not because you told them they need to feel it, you know? A mistake I've definitely made, and I'm sure a lot of you have too, is that I thought intimidating meant loud, big voices with big gestures, slamming fists on tables. It turns out that's almost the opposite of what actually reads as dangerous. Noise signals vulnerability, stillness signals ownership. Lord Malvo in Fargo talks slow, soft, and almost gentle. Police pull guns on him, criminals threaten him, and his pulse, narratively speaking, never seems to move. He treats other people's sense of morality like it's a thin pane of glass he can tap and shatter whenever he feels like it, and he never has to raise his voice to do it. Or Makishima from Psychopaths, who can commit genuinely horrific violence standing right in front of machines built to scan for exactly that kind of malice, and register as completely clean, because on some level he's just not not disturbed by it. The absence of internal noise is what makes him terrifying. This actually lines up with how a lot of actors known for playing unsettling characters approach performance. Stillness, upright posture, unhurried speech, barely blinking, and there's a whole bodywork of non-verbal status signaling that says the same thing. People who are genuinely high status take up central space without adjusting for anyone else. And they use pauses, actual silence as weapons, because it forces everyone else to wait on their rhythm, and I actually think about this as an axis now, honestly. Here's the scenario I'll use to teach this: the uninterrupted meal. Your party breaks into the villain's manor expecting a fight. Instead, they find Lord Vane alone at a dining table, eating a peach with a small paring knife. The paladin draws his steel and shouts a challenge, and Vane doesn't reach for a weapon, he just finishes chewing, sets the knife down, wipes his fingers on a napkin, and looks up silent for 3 full seconds before he says a single word, low and unhurried. That pause is doing more work than a stat block ever could. One important boundary here: control is something you perform through tone and body language and the environment. It is never something you narrate onto your players. You don't ever say your character is too scared to attack. As soon as you do that, you're almost taken over the agency from the player characters at your table. Let the fear come from what they choose to do in that silence and not from you telling them how they feel. Alright, so this next one is the piece I think people underrate the most. If your players can predict exactly what your villain wants and how they'll react, it becomes more of a tactical math problem, or it needs a gap, that nagging feeling that this person is operating on rules your party genuinely cannot map. Anton Chigurh is the textbook case here. He's terrifying specifically because he cannot be bribed, or threatened, or reasoned with, using any leverage a normal person would recognize. His logic is internally consistent, it's just not human logic, and that's the whole point. Or like Gontro Dim from Witcher 3, disguised the whole time as a harmless mirror salesman, casually helpful one moment, trading riddles the next, and then without changing his tone at all, stopping time to violently punish someone for the crime of interrupting him. His power feels bottomless because you've never learned where the edges of it are, you know? There's this neuroscience angle here too, and honestly it's kind of a wild one. When a dominant figure's behavior is unpredictable, your nervous system literally can't complete something called fear extinction. Normally, if you're exposed to a threat repeatedly and nothing bad happens, your brain relaxes, it extinguishes the fear, essentially. But if the pattern never resolves into something predictable, your startle response and your threat alertness just stay switched on. The brain can't file the villain away as understood, so it never stops treating them as dangerous. Here's an example I love for this: the uncalculated gift. Your party finally confronts the Archmage, who intercepted their heist. They're braced for a fight. Instead, the Archmage just hands their thief the exact relic they came to steal, thanks them for saving him the trouble of unlocking the vault himself, and asks if anyone wants tea before they go. There's no attack or demands, he just leaves. Your players will spend the next 3 sessions absolutely convinced that relic is cursed. It isn't, he just genuinely didn't care about it. Another thing as well is that status is relational. You cannot establish aura just by narrating he looks very intimidating and expecting it to land. Trust me, I've tried it, it doesn't work. What actually sells a villain's power is watching other high status characters fold in their presence. Look at King Bradley from Full Metal Alchemist. Most of the time he plays like a friendly, almost goofy older guy, but the second he walks into a room, battle-hardened generals, men who order executions without blinking, instantly snap to attention and go quiet. That reaction from them tells the audience everything. This is basically social rank as it actually works in real human groups. You deduce power by watching the interactions around the powerful person, the submissive signals from people near them, gaze aversion, sudden compliance, or people physically shrinking a little. That's what tells the observer where the power in the room sits, you know? And something that we see in movies and novels, the author controls both the villain and the hero's reaction to the villain. That's most of the trick, honestly, but in a TTRPG, you only control half of that equation. You control the world. Your players control their characters, and their characters do not have to be scared just because the narrative wants them to be. This isn't a flaw. I actually think this is probably the best thing about it, but it does mean you're fighting a very few specific, very tabletop-shaped problems. The action economy, 4 PCs against 1 villain is brutal math. A boss who played fair by normal combat rules gets surrounded and bursts down in 2 rounds, no matter how cool their intro was. Or that mid-speech crossbow shot. Somebody's ranger character is gonna absolutely try to shoot your villain in the middle of your dramatic monologue. Every table has that player. If you don't, it's probably you. And then you've got the table humor. Players use jokes to diffuse tension. It's not disrespect, it's just how tables work. Comedy is a relief valve, and it will find your villain's big moment eventually. It could all fall apart just by you mentioning their name if it sounds funny. But something you can't do is take that choice by force. You can't just place an anti-magic field that conveniently stops the crossbow bolt, or a forced paralysis effect right when someone tries to act. It doesn't create the cinematic moment you're picturing in your head. It just makes your players feel cheated, but you can design around these problems. You just can't script your way past them. Flamey, how do I fix this? Glad you asked, viewer. Instead of scripting a scene, you prep a situation. One where your villain has real tactical depth, real spatial protection, and mechanics that respond dynamically to whatever your players throw at them. Look at Raphael from Baldur's Gate 3. He operates almost entirely in neutral, opulent spaces. Planar taverns, formal dining halls, places where throwing a punch is obviously visibly a bad idea before anyone tries it. Or my boy Ketheric Thorm, who demonstrates that he's unkillable in the middle of a speech, just letting someone stab him and says, do it again. And this is basically the whole design philosophy behind prep situations or plots. You build villains' dynamic social or tactical environments with clear, logical boundaries. Instead of a script, give your bosses tactical intelligence, real cover, real choke points, targeting the squishy spellcaster first, having an actual retreat plan, and give them layer actions, being the masters of their space. Because like I say, you can't just change what's happening there at the table because it's ruining your villain plans, you know. If you thought they'd be cooler or have more aura about them, it's something that you can prep for in advance. What would they have? What would they know? They have a space. How would they control it? It's all things that they would have, you know. And if that goes tits up, that's your fault for not prepping. Here's what some of that actually would look like at the table. You have social buffer zones. Frame the big non-combat confrontation somewhere. Throwing a punch is obviously costly, like a public gala or a neutral summit or a crowded square. Tactical choke points like elevated terrain or hazard zones, total cover, and actual bodyguard detail make the space itself part of the villain's defense, because it would be. And weaponized interruptions. This is a big one because it happens a lot. If a player attacks mid-speech, don't railroad it. Call for initiative immediately. Let a legendary reaction and a counter spell or a deflect missiles ability absorb the hit in the character, then weave the reaction right back into the scene. I mean, look at these two different examples. An invisible barrier stops your arrow. He keeps talking. Or roll initiative. As your bowstring snaps, Lord Vane doesn't even look at you. He raises a gauntlet, catches the arrow mid-air with his reaction, snaps it in half without breaking eye contact, and says on his turn that he was hoping someone's aim would improve under pressure. Here's some ways you can mess this up that I have done at least all of these once. The screaming tantrum. The second the party lands a real hit, the villain starts shouting, swearing, losing composure. It's such a natural instinct as a GM because you're excited the fight's going well, but it instantly cashes in all the status you built. A high aura response looks completely different. They wipe the blood off, look at it with something closer to curiosity than anger, and smile. You have the Tuesday villain, showing up every single session to shake a fist and get chased off again. Familiarity breeds contempt, and there's actual neuroscience behind why. Repeated exposure to a threat with no real consequence causes fear extinction. If your players see the villain 3 times with nothing at stake, their brains quietly, reasonably just classify him as a background noise. The escaping teleport loop. The villain hits 5 hit points, teleports away again, and again, and again. A way to fix this is to use an indirect victory instead. The villain doesn't flee because they're losing the battle. They're left because they already got what they came for. The party just doesn't know that yet. Explaining the whole mystery. Over-explaining the origin story or the motive, the exact mechanics of the plan. I get the impulse. You've done all this world building, you're excited for them to know what's happening and the backstory and the lore behind it, but the mystique is a resource. Once you've spent it, it's gone. The through line of all 4 of these is the same. Aura dies the moment a villain becomes predictable, over-explained, or emotionally reactive. Every one of these mistakes is really just noise dressed up as drama. Here's something that you can use as a GM sitting there with your own body and voice. The 3-second rule. When a player demands an answer or throws throws down a threat, do not answer immediately, just pause. Hold total silence for 3 full seconds, looking directly at them. It feels unbearably long when you're doing it, but it reads as total control from the other side of the table. Volume drop. Don't get louder to command the room, get quieter, drop your voice by something like 30%. Watch what happens. People are going to start paying attention, they're going to go quiet on their own and just listen to you. You didn't have to ask for silence, you engineered it. Physical stillness. Hands flat on the table or behind your back, stop rolling dice absent-mindedly, stop flipping pages and fidgeting with miniatures while you're talking in character. Your hands are telling a story whether you mean them to or not. An environmental shift. Describe the sensory change before the entrance. The torches gutter low, the tavern noise just stops all at once, or the cold air rolls in from somewhere that shouldn't have a draft. You need to let your players feel the room change before they see the villain in it. And the last one is a signature marker. Give your villain one repeated specific visual motif, something like a silver coin left on the eyes of the dead, or a particular rune scratched into stone at every scene. The first time it's a detail, but the third time your players see it and their stomach starts to drop before you've said another word. None of these require a better voice, a scarier laugh, or a decade of acting classes. It's just pacing and restraint. And honestly, probably about 70% about what you don't do. Horror isn't about having like a level 20 character or a tragic monologue or you forcing cutscenes. The horror is the moment your players realize 3 things at once. This character matters, this character is in complete control of the space, and nobody at the table has any idea what they're about to do next. Let me know in the comments how you do your villains like this. How do your villains have aura? If you're a player, which was your favorite one? Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy, adventurers.